तुषारहार धवला या शुभ्रवस्त्रावृता या वीणावरदण्डमण्डितकरा या श्वेतपद्मासना या कुन्देन्दुतुषारहारधवला या शुभ्रवस्त्रावृता या वीणावरदण्डमण्डितकरा या श्वेतपद्मासना या ब्रह्मच्युतशङ्कर प्रभृतिभिर्देवैः सदा वन्दिता सा मां पातु सरस्वती सरस्वती।
Sona Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Jirendra, Jai Swami Nara, Sai Ram. A very warm welcome from Women to Women. Good evening to you all. Today we have a special talk. Apologies from Caroline. She's on leave on holiday, and then on her return she's going to be busy with the family wedding. So we're going to miss her for a couple of months, and then extra month for recovery. So in her place, we have got today Dr. Pratima Singh. Pratima Singh is an experienced psychiatrist with vast clinical experience in the UK since 2004. She completed her training from Maudsley's training scheme and also worked as a consultant psychiatrist at South London and Maudsley NHS Trust, among other roles. She obtained her membership from the Royal College of Psychiatrists in January 2008 and has been on the GMC's specialist register as a specialist in treating adults with a variety of mental health conditions, and since 2013. She is a sought after speaker in the field of nutrition in mental health in the UK, being one of the foremost psychiatrists to advocate the role of intensive lifestyle-based interventions to improve outcomes in mental health. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to, Dr. Singh is going to talk about nutrition and how food is affected to our mental health. Can I introduce you to Dr. Pratima Singh, please?
Thank you so much, Panna, for inviting me to give this talk. Can you indicate if you can see my screen?
We can.
Right. So we have about an hour, and I'd like to kind of speak for 45 minutes and then maybe deal with some questions. So can you see the slide that says nutritional interventions in mental health?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so I'm using Prezi. If it stops, please just let me know. I've been told I talk too fast, so if I go fast, feel free to stop me. This can be interactive. I must say that I did not have time to make a separate presentation, so I've taken a part of my the presentation that I do to a wide variety of audience, lay public, medical doctors, GPs, medical students, just to raise awareness about why lifestyle is so important for good mental health. But today I'll be focusing only on nutrition. Yeah. So this is not to take away the importance of so many other social, economical, personal, psychological factors. But today, nutrition is the focus to see, like, how are these two connected? How is good mental health and well-being connected to nutrition? The presentation will have some science, because I strongly believe that one of the things that makes it very difficult to utilize nutrition information is that the information is very varied. Yeah? You read something in the newspaper today that's excellent for you, the next day it's bad for you. So we should keep to the science and see what science is telling us about how we should be eating. So the story actually begins with a bit of my background. So of course, I'm from India. I come from Nagpur, and I was trained in a modality, as I can see many of the attendees in this group are from the Indian right. So my interest in a more holistic approach to health began because of my background. So in India, we have the coexistence of various conventional as well as holistic traditional healthcare system, of which Ayurveda, homeopathy, Unani, are some of the few. Now, the other unique thing about India is that even if you become a specialist, you still also remain a generalist, because people just cannot afford to go to different specialists for different parts of their body. So in my training in India, even though I worked as a psychiatrist back there, I think I was still seeing and still involved in looking at patients more completely. However, the medication-based treatment was common and is still quite common in mental health, and psychotherapy resources are very rare. But one of the things that happened is that patients would often ask me, "So, doctor, what should I eat for my depression or for my anxiety?" Now, this question comes because in Ayurveda there is a centrality of gut health to all health. So in Ayurveda, no matter if you have rheumatoid arthritis or psoriasis or asthma, an Ayurvedic doctor will always first inquire about your gut health, your daily bowel motion. Please can everybody mute themselves if that's okay? Or maybe, Panna, if there's a setting where you can mute. Yeah. So now this particular wisdom comes from, the belief that we should always be looking at our health not as a separate entity, but something that exists in tandem with our entire life. So the Ayurvedic lifestyle places a lot of emphasis on daily routines, on niyams. So, the discipline of having a routine of eating, sleeping, exercise, etc., is considered very fundamental to health. The other unique observation of a holistic health system like Ayurveda, it recognizes that no two people are same. So people are divided in terms of their individual body constitutions, which are called as doshas. The gut health is supposed to be central to overall health and use of herbs. Now, having said that, even Hippocrates says that let food be thy medicine. So there's an appreciation in many different cultures that food and gut health is quite important. But in Ayurveda, it literally, every examination of a patient begins from examination of the tongue and the pulse. The tongue is very much seen as the window to the whole alimentary canal, so your whole gastrointestinal system. The other thing Ayurveda tells is that, we should not be eating, we don't do anything same all the time. We change our behaviors, our clothing, etc., according to the season. And the same thing should apply to food. The seasonality of the food intake and the routines are called as Ritukriya. Of course, with any lifestyle that's based on Ayurveda, there's a great emphasis of rest, recuperation, but also contemplative practices, be it yoga, meditation, or prayer. And, when I say yoga, I don't mean yoga in the Western concept, where yoga is seen more as an exercise or a posture. In Ayurveda, yoga is very much thought to be a movement meditation, and the time where you connect deeply and meaningfully with your body, and every yoga is done as a dedication to the creator. The other thing in Ayurveda was not only what goes in, but what goes out. So there is a great emphasis on balancing rituals. Yeah. So in modern lingo, this will be called as detox. Yeah, and this was not limited to just kind of taking a tea, that was a detox, but having a annual kind of a ritual of using fasting, or eating a grain-free diet for a few days, etc. And the idea was that this would help the body get rid of the toxins that we habitually collect. And sometimes, these balancing rituals were also supplemented by some very specific treatments. So, for example, Panchakarma is the 5 rituals of detoxification, and it consists of, an enema, putting using things to clear out the sinuses, etc. So this was a specialist intervention, usually done by Ayurvedic doctors. So the lifestyle believed, like, if you did all of this, then you will be in your most vibrant health. And you'll appreciate that this is a very different approach to health than how we think conventionally, and definitely how I was trained for. So this is one slide that gives an idea about what this looks like. And as you can see that in the 4 quadrants are the four seasons, and there is an appreciation of what happens to the dosha. So, for example, spring is when there is kapha provocation, whereas summer you collect more heat, so that's the pitta. And then what panchakarma routine is goes hand in hand with that. So this was a finely balanced, attuned method which placed emphasis on individual dietary recommendation based on the individual constitutions, along with fasting, or what I call as a digestive holiday, to give your gut a complete break from digesting food, so that we could rest and repair at a much deep level. And does any of this actually work? So the problem with researching any holistic system is that when it works, we don't know which component is working. Yeah, right. So that is why randomized control trials are the gold standard in researching treatments, because you only introduce one change at a time. Whereas when you think about a lifestyle, the Ayurvedic lifestyle that has got 100 different components, even if it works, it's very hard to know what works. And that is one of the things that makes it very difficult to research not only these kind of lifestyles, but also nutrition. Because when you eat, you do not eat a vitamin or a mineral or a macronutrient. You are eating a beautiful, complex combination of multiple things that then interacts with you, the organisms. So based on your constitution, so that interaction is what will lead to the change. But having said that, I've just picked up this paper because it was published in one of the best, highly respected scientific journals, called as Nature. And this was a very short research that they took 2 groups of people, and in a nice, lovely resort, they allowed one group to just have a holiday. Yeah? So they were not allowed any alcohol or anything like that, but they were just allowed to take a break, enjoy the resort, and have a good time. The other group at the same resort had a 6-day Panchakarma-based Ayurvedic intervention, and this included a vegetarian diet, some Ayurvedic herbs, and yoga, meditation. And what they found, that in a very short period of time, so less than a week, 186 plasma metabolites, so measurable elements of the blood showed a positive trend in the group that had the intervention. So, that is the power of holistic treatment, that even a short treatment, both the groups were relaxed. So the reason why they were compared with somebody there, so you could not say, oh, they were relaxed and that's why this changed. The change was very much down to the intervention, and it was significant. So this is how pronounced it can be. Now, obviously, bringing you back to where we are. So I came to UK in 2004. I completed my training, and I think I obtained one of the most world-class training at Maudsley. But my observation while going through the training was that the mind-body split was really still very much alive. Medication was the main thing we were offering up patients. And actually, it's during my training when I did a healthcare fellowship and saw how we do medicine, how we run the business of medicine, is I realized that it is actually what separates the mind from the body, etc. So I was quite disappointed as a young doctor to come to the West and find that as a psychiatrist, I neither had my examination couch. Psychiatrists are not expected to deal with the patient's body at all, and nor did it have the therapy couch, which is what attracted me to come and train in Europe. And what do we found? That when you have a mental health condition, you actually have problematic lifestyle associated with, and some of it could be related to being depressed or having an anxiety disorder, etc., or it could be linked to having a poor lifestyle. So this is an interesting summary by Joseph Firth in Lancet Psychiatry Commission that shows that across the board, people with mental illness, whether it's depression, anxiety, bipolar, etc., they struggle more with misusing alcohol, smoking more, having reduced physical activity, having a poor diet, having sleeping problems. So, this is a very much prevalent thing that we see. We also see that patients with serious mental illness have an extremely poor diet and leads to a lot of nutritional deficiencies. So we know that these patients, patients who struggle with these conditions have a high fiber, a high fat diet, very low fiber, so eating lots of processed food compared to people who might not have the same difficulties. They also consume much more saturated fat, a lot more sugar, and are possibly likely to even salt their food more. And in specific groups, so for example, in schizophrenia in a Scottish cohort, what they found was a significant reduced amount of fruits, vegetables, pulses, potatoes, milk, etc. And what we also find when we look at the details in this meta-analysis is that when people have mental health difficulties, they're often deficient in some key nutrients. And this could be folate, which is a type of a B vitamin, vitamin B12, selenium, zinc, iron. And then you will hear what the significance of this is later on in the presentation. And why should this be of any interest to me? Because my patients are dying 18 to 20 years sooner than the rest of the population. So life expectancy or mortality rate for patients with serious mental illness like schizophrenia and bipolar is significantly reduced. And part of this could be related to their lifestyle factors. So this is what got me interested in this area. And I started to look at, so, if I think this is important, what should I be advising my patient? I didn't want to be one of those doctors, again, who just, gave very non-specific advice, oh, eat better, exercise more. I knew that for my patient group, and especially when people are very depressed and might not have the energy or motivation, or they might have anxiety, which means that it affects how they eat, what they do. I think I looked at evidence to see what was the best evidence that would lead. And I think this is a fantastic paper. It's called the SMILES trial. It's from Australia. And in this paper, in this research group, they took 166 patients, And then of them, they took about 67 patients and divided them into two groups. One group just had kind of weekly social interaction, and the other group had what they call as a modified Mediterranean dietary intervention. And this particular group had 7 one-to-one personalized dietitian or nutritional counseling sessions. They got a hamper of food, which was along the lines of the Mediterranean diet. So the Mediterranean diet has 12 main food groups, which I'll later talk about. So, after 3 months, they compared the groups, and what they found is that the modified Mediterranean diet group had a significant improvement in their depression versus the other group that came here and that just socialized. Now, what is unique about this trial is that it was one of the first trials that included patients with moderate to severe depression. Yeah, before that, anybody with or without depression was included. But this is like serious mental illness where patients are on medication and they have tried number thing. And what was fantastic is that 1/3 of the patient in that group, just by virtue of eating this modified Mediterranean diet, achieved remission. So, they were no longer depressed within 12 weeks, that is 3 months. And if you ask me as a prescribing psychiatrist, if I have any other intervention that has that effect, I will tell you that I don't. Although I use medication on a daily basis, it works for many people. Many patients have lots of problems or might even have actually adverse reaction to it. But this is so food is really medicine. Now, when people are depressed, we think, but they can't do this. But this trial shows that most people with the right support and information were able to make positive changes to their diet. They also showed that the more they changed the diet, the better their depression improved. And they actually found that eating more healthy was actually cheaper. So it really busted the myths that we hold, healthy food is very expensive, and they actually showed that it's not in the longer term. And if you carefully see what you are spending your money on, then actually the Mediterranean diet was shown to be cheaper. And they also showed that there are whole system benefits to eating better. A similar trial that I would like to mention, slightly longer, because you might say, 3 months, that's not long enough. So this was a trial for 6 months, and also from Australia. This was called the HealthyMed trial. And in this trial, what they gave is that they didn't have any nutritional counseling. Yeah, so they didn't have any specialist advice. They just got every fortnight, they would get a Mediterranean food hamper, but instead they had cooking workshops. And, like the SMILES trial, what they found again, that the patients in the Mediterranean diet group actually improved much more than others. And the group that had a lot of diversity of vegetable and supplemented with nuts actually had the best improvement in the depression scores. So, you and I should be asking, so what, should the whole world be eating the Mediterranean diet, even if we are not Mediterranean, if you are Asian or if you are English, so should the whole world? And, that does not sound right based on what I said about Ayurveda, that, diet is something very individual and personalized in keeping with who you are and where you are. So, that's why I just wanted to quote this paper, which shows that actually traditional diets, whether they are, even if they are Japanese or Mediterranean or Norwegian, they have the same components that lead to the benefit. And what are their components? First thing is that these traditional dietary patterns are associated with very little and next to no intake of processed grains, sweets, fast foods. And they are rich in fruit, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. And there is a high intake of omega-3 rich fish. So, these common, as long as your diet has these components, you can still be eating, for example, an Indian diet and get the same benefits rather than, running out and getting quinoa, for example. You can think about what to remove first before you add. I'm going to skip some of the slides in there, but, just to say that when they have looked at observational studies, when they have looked at whole population, they have found the same thing, that if people adhere to a traditional Mediterranean diet, and if you then look into future, the studies show that there is a 1/3 reduction in depression in groups of patients who eat this way. Now, whenever I present this from the audience, I'm often asked, oh, what about multivitamins? What about this supplement, that supplement? So I include this slide. So I always include this slide to say that for everything that you find a positive study, you will find 3 studies that say exactly the opposite. So that's why I quote this meta-analysis of randomized control trials, because it does show that there are a handful of nutrients that seem to repeatedly come as a positive correlation. And nobody will be surprised to hear that vitamin D, having adequate, not excessive, but having adequate vitamin D levels has been shown to reduce the depressive symptoms in patients who are clinically depressed. They've also found that folate, again, a B vitamin found in green leafy vegetables, has been shown to be associated with a greater reduction in depressive symptoms, even if patients are taking that alongside their general medication. Omega-3 from fatty fish or even omega-3 supplements have been shown to have an adjunctive role, etc. And the last one I will mention is NAC. NAC is N-acetylcysteine. It's a precursor. NAC is usually used as a nutritional supplement, but in medical settings, it is used as an antidote to paracetamol poisoning, because it's a very powerful antioxidant. And when there's a poisoning, what it does is that it quickly increases the levels of glutathione, which is a master antioxidant in the body. And the same effect is hypothesized in having an impact in depression. So the next, so how does food affect the behavior? How does all this magic actually happen? And to answer this, I will kind of draw your attention to this paper, which basically they looked at what are the 12 top antidepressant nutrients. And then they looked at the foods, both animal and plant foods, where these are most abundantly present. And what were the nutrients? These were, again, folate. Yeah, you can see the theme, same nutrients coming up again and again. So folate, iron, omega-3 fatty acids, magnesium, potassium, selenium, thiamine, vitamin A, B6, B12, vitamin C, and zinc. So these 12 nutrients are in research, have been shown to be most closely related to good mental health and prevention, as well as recovery from depression. And now the researchers looked at, what are the food groups where these are most abundantly present. So as you can see, they are most abundantly present in vegetables. So the mean AFS is the food score, the antidepressant food score, and it's most abundantly in vegetables, then in organ meats, then fruits, seafood, legumes, and as you can see, the list. And to look at it in a bit more detail, left-hand side shows the animal foods, right-hand side, the vegetable sources. And if you see the comparison, the concentration of the nutrients and the score is twice as much in vegetables than it is in even animal foods. But you have to keep in mind that you have to eat a lot more of vegetables in terms of quantity and volume to get that as compared to the animal. And a good comparison would be organ meat. So people who do eat meat, organ meat, which has got a very compacted nutrient density, might benefit more. But most of us, like even if people eat meat, they should also eat plenty of vegetables. The green leafy vegetables, watercress, spinach, mustard, lettuce, Swiss chard, herbs of different kinds, coriander, basil, parsley, chicory, etc., peppers, kale. So, kale is touted, but see how low kale comes in that list. There are so many other things which are possibly cheaper and more available that we might not be aware of because they just don't get that much advertisement as, kale does, for example. So, this is just to remind you that there is no running away from vegetables. They really are the key to nutrient density. And so the other mechanism where this happens is that, what they found in this paper is that when people are, whether they are vegan or vegetarian or omnivores, all the people who had an improvement on the Mediterranean diet, this was very closely associated with improved microbial diversity. So people who ate this way actually had a great gut microbiome. So I'm going to spend a few minutes on this slide, which I think is really the key slide of this presentation. And if you don't remember anything from the talk today, I would really love you for you to keep this in mind and take this away, information away. So when we talk about gut health, there are two things that we often think about, prebiotic and probiotic. Now, probiotic is something most people recognize. And so I've just put it all in a slide. So prebiotic is basically the food for the gut bacteria. Postbiotic is all the good things made by the good bacteria or the bad bacteria, and the probiotics are actually the live bacteria. So we think about, oh, this food is probiotic. Actually, the live bacteria in the food, which has the living organism, is what makes it a probiotic. And these are usually fermented vegetables or fermented dairy. Yeah. So, so when I say fermented means that the bacteria eat the sugar present in these foods and digest it and change its form. And while they do it, they make all these lovely postbiotics. So probiotics can be fermented, but non-pasteurized, because when you pasteurize it, you're kind of sterilizing it. So fermented cheese, pickles, which are not in vinegar, but in salt or brine, yogurt, buttermilk, kefir, or these are examples of fermented dairy. But kimchi, sauerkraut, miso, natto, these are all examples of fermented vegetables and grains. So kimchi is fermented Korean cabbage, and it's made with a nice Korean red chili powder. It's actually the most palatable of all the fermented, closest to the Indian taste. So I really like it. I make it twice a year, a big batch, and then we eat it regularly. Sauerkraut is fermented cabbage. It's a German dish eaten as a side. And this is a good probiotic. And then miso, natto, tempeh are all fermented soy. And then there are some drinks as well. Now, you have to keep in mind that the probiotic drinks that you get in the supermarket actually contain a lot of sugar. So, they are sold as probiotics, but actually the best probiotics are extremely cheap and easy to make at home. Now, the prebiotic are the food. So there's no point eating the probiotic if your normal diet does not have the fiber needed to feed the good bacteria. So the fiber comes from two kinds of food products, and their fancy jargon names are fructooligosaccharides and inulin. But in terms of the food, these come from asparagus, onion, leeks, garlic, green bananas, Jerusalem artichokes, chicory. And legumes like chickpeas, all are grains and legumes and lentils, especially when they are whole grain and they have that nice hard cover, the fibrous cover that has all the good fiber that helps our gut bacteria. And mushrooms, barley, oats, rye, all of these in their whole grain form are great sources of prebiotic. Now, when we think about where is a gut microbiome, when people say, where is it actually located? Is it in our stomach? Is it in a small intestine? No, it's in the large intestine. So the gut microbiome is actually the part of the intestine, which is right towards the end, where almost everything is being digested and all the useful things absorbed, and we are preparing to make the stool that we pass. If you have bacteria in the wrong place, like the small intestine, you actually will have symptoms of gasiness, bloating, flatulence, or a lot of burping. And this condition is called a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And many times this might be diagnosed as IBS, or irritable bowel syndrome. As soon as somebody eats something, they have an upset stomach. Now, if you have a healthy stomach with a good acid level, the acid is the main thing that sterilizes all the pathogens. So, if you by chance eat something that is a bit dodgy, the role of the stomach acid is to sterilize it. So the process actually begins from the mouth, salivary amylase, then the gut. So when people are on long-term proton pump inhibitors like omeprazole or pantoprazole, and we neutralize the acid, we actually reduce that barrier, that protective function, and more bacteria can go and then seed the small intestine where it should not be there, creating the IBS-like symptom. The other more common reason could be that people are eating more processed food. There is less fiber available to feed the good bacteria. Now, why should this be any issue? Because we want our probiotic bacteria to survive and have a good chance of reaching the right place. But we know through postbiotics that even a dead good bacteria is better than no bacteria at all, because the bacteria actually does not survive, but by the process of by making the fermentation products, what they end up doing is that they make different kind of B vitamins, B1, 2, 7, 12, vitamin K. They also make food that for the intestinal lining, they actually act as mild antibiotics. So the good bacteria make things that can keep the bad bacteria in check. And if you don't have a healthy gut bacteria, then what you make is like this slow poison. And I use the word poison because it's not a poison that instantly kills you, but it gives you that indigestion, the fatigue, or what we call as lipopolysaccharides, would create low grade of inflammation throughout your body. Now, just a reminder that there are many people who say, "Oh, I eat a lot of fiber," and yes, I think that is wonderful. So, a high fiber diet has been associated with increase in the microbiome function, but actually, to get that immune benefit, if you that improvement in depression by anti-inflammatory effect, you get when that same fiber is in fermented form. So, just rather than eating only the fibers, thinking about how to include on a regular basis some kind of fermented food is quite key. I will skip this, but just to say that we don't have one, but we actually have two brains. One is inside our head, but the other is in our gut. So the gut is called as the second brain because it is very neurologically active. So the gut bacteria actually make different kind of neurotransmitters, and we don't yet know about how this interacts with our brain, but we do know that the same neurotransmitters made in the brain are also made in the gut, but they don't travel to the brain. However, through the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body. We know that the vagus nerve acts like a information superhighway, and there is some kind of signaling, some kind of talk going on between the gut and the brain. And the healthier the gut microbiome, the better the signaling is. Whereas if the gut is inflamed because of a poor diet or due to an infection, and if the signals are inflammatory, then the effect on the brain is that of, that looks similar to depression or anxiety. And this has all been studied mostly in animal models and only just being started to be studied in humans, because as you can imagine, we cannot biopsy the brain for human studies. There is also new research coming actually from the UK that shows that if you have a very bad colony of gut bacteria, they steal the raw material that actually your brain needs. Yeah, and a good example would be when people have anxiety and they go on a medication, for example, like serotonin. The first thing you will notice is that the gut symptoms. Yeah, they start to have some nausea, because 90% of the body's serotonin is actually made in the gut. 10%, roughly 10% is made in the brain. So, things are happening locally, and we don't yet completely understand how the gut-brain axis works. But this is an area of increased interest. I will skip some of these and come so that we have time for questions. So, what do I do in my daily clinic? So even though I am a normal community psychiatrist, I make sure that at least 5 minutes of each of my consultation is focused on the patient's diet. And what I will encourage everybody in today's webinar is to think about, what your culture of cooking and eating has been. What are your skills? If you're on medication, what have you noticed? What impact might that be having? Is it making you constipated? Does it give you a dry mouth? How does that influence what you eat or don't eat? What are the personal meanings you're applying to food? What kind of excuses we might be making to continue doing something that we know? And what is the emotional meaning behind that? Because food is very emotive. Yeah, food is not something like popping a pill. It is loaded with emotions, and understanding what your emotional connection with food is, and what the culture of food that you live with is as important as the food you eat. Everybody tells me that their diet is okay, and now I just don't even say anything to it. But I encourage people to do a food diary. So in my clinic, sometimes if the person is on board, I will ask them to do a 3-day food diary. But most of the patients, I will ask them for about what they ate and drank the day before. The other thing is, if you're thinking about changing, you have to be very clear about what is the motivation. I can tell you that guilt never lasts. As a psychiatrist, people who want to change their diet because they feel guilty about not doing, that is not a good enough motivation. I think you have to dig deep about, oh, I want to be more healthy. But what will that look like? What would you do that you're currently not doing if you were that more healthy or in less pain or a lesser weight? Digging deep into your motivation will help you make goals that hold you when the going gets tough. What time you sleep, how active you are, all of that impacts on how we eat, and I think should be taken into consideration. So don't compare with your best friend who is fantastically following the diet, because they might have a completely separate set of conditions compared to you. And what do I find in my patients? I find in my patients, again, I'm a psychiatrist. If I were a GP, I would probably be saying different things. But in mental health, I find that poor eating habits and actually lack of cooking skills are very common. And, this was a very humbling experience for me, because I came from a culture where everybody cooked, fresh meals twice a day. There was not so much access to, cheap, unhealthy food. Now, obviously, it's completely different. India is no different to any other place. There is a lot, like literally, shops opening, before you can blink. So I think we are becoming very westernized, sadly, when it comes to eating and, going for convenience foods. But, I made a lot of assumptions about cooking and eating, which over the time I learned to develop a bit more humility and curiosity about people, because, maybe I found that people who I did not expect to have any interest or skills had a lot, and people where I assumed, oh, this is a family, this must happen. Actually, it could be otherwise. The other thing to say is that both patients and controls, like one thing that is common between me and my patients is that we all underestimate the unhealthy foods and snacks that we eat, and we all overestimate. So this is why I love doing this, because it is so equalizing. And when we did this a small study, we were doing a kind of a pre-trial to replicate the SMILES trial. We took a bunch of students from King's College London, and then we had a group of patients from my community team. And what we found that both the groups reported less, and there were many methods of collecting. They had to take pictures of their food, and they also had to fill food diaries. And what we found that this is human nature. This is not even about being depressed or not depressed. And so that's why actually before you start to make any food plans or go on a diet, one very useful thing is to actually record, even if it is for a week, about what you act, how much you. And a good example would be, I used to always think that I drink enough water because I drank more than anybody else in my family. But I try and do almost everything I ask my patients to do. And that's when I went and got this pint glass, because it's easy to measure. It is 330 mils. So I knew to make 2 liters, I almost need to drink 5. And I very quickly learned that what I thought I did, I really was not doing. So now I have this glass and I have a count going that by the end of the day, I have to make sure I'm drinking at least 5 pint glasses of water. So, again, I think quantification and not guessing and actually measuring really helps. What I find both with patients, but also friends and colleagues, is that it is now very normal for people to go long periods without food and then have one big meal. Yeah, I think I've got a few more minutes and then I'll wind up. And the other thing is that when we don't have energy, that dip, we often fuel that by drinking stimulants like caffeine, nicotine, etc., which might also be a problem. So, now quickly going through this, before you make any food changes, we have to be very mindful of the environment that we live in. And, UK consumes the highest amount of processed food in Europe. Up to 40% of the food eaten in the UK is highly processed packaged food. Portugal is the lowest, so the closest to the Mediterranean that you will find, and America is the worst, with the highest consumption being around 60. So I think in my practice, as I mentioned, I would take the history, I will inquire about people's water intake, their bowel habits, but the first thing I would focus on is how much processed food they are eating. And I use the acronym CRAP, where C stands for carbonated drinks, refined flours, artificial sweeteners, and processed junk. So quickly, in my head, the first estimate I'm taking is how much of this person's day-to-day diet, either from their dietary history or the questions I'm asking, how much of their percentage is processed food. Because I do know that when you have a 40 to 60% of your food intakes processed, I think the change has to be very small and incremental. The other thing I'm looking at is blood sugar. Now, I think many members in this group, because I know I got introduced to your group through the low carb program. So, this infographic is by Dr. David Unwin. This is printed, laminated in my work bag every single day, every single clinic, and I use it regularly. And the reason I use it is I educate people about sugar, but also the hidden sugar in day-to-day foods, and the impact it has on our health. And when I do that, I'm often asked about sweeteners. Unfortunately, there is not great difference when it comes to metabolic health between sugar and sweetener. Research is now very clear that sweeteners include dysbiosis. They have a negative effect on the gut microbiome, and they actually have the same impact on glucose intolerance as sugar does. And why is that? Because sweeteners are 200 times sweeter than sugar. They have the same metabolic effect as sugar without the calories. They contribute to the metabolic burden and obesity. They alter the gut microbiome. And the last one, there is no reference to that because that's my personal view and my experience. I think it keeps us habituated to the sweet taste. It reduces the palatability of the natural flavor of plant foods and keeps us addicted to sugar. Yeah, so we are it's something constantly on our mind, and we are constantly debating on it, and often, it becomes. And why so much fuss about sugar? Because at least in my clinical practice, I have found that focusing on healthy blood sugar control is one of the most important things you do before you do anything else. And I use this slide where I will ask the patient, I'll take a food history and I will tell patients. So the two green lines that you are seeing is what our body is designed for. So, our bodies and our anatomy has not changed for hundreds or thousands of years. So evolution means that we very slowly adapt to things when our environment changes. So the two green lines shows the narrow and very tight level of sugar control that we have in our body and the role of insulin. So when we wake up after an overnight fast, our sugar is low. Now, at that time, excuse me, when we bombard our body with a sugary breakfast, so I've used the example that my patients often eat. It would be a glass of orange juice and a bowl of sugary cereal, for example. The sugar spikes up, and temporarily they feel buzz, they feel energetic because their brain has a lot of raw material. But the rebound effect, the sugar, when the food does not have a good amount of protein, fat to hold the sugar, then the sugar does not come down smoothly. It tanks down, it crashes into hypoglycemia, and this is called the reactive hypoglycemia. So the response, the rebound from a high. And when the blood sugar crashes, this is often when my patients would talk about fatigue, feeling their mood has suddenly changed, feeling jittery, anxious. And this is when they reach out for that snack to feel better. And again, putting the sugar high, again, feeling okay, this insulin quickly works to remove it from the sugar. And this yo-yoing can continue, and it contribute to mood swings, depression, weight gain, and eventually insulin fatigue. The body just gets tired and stops reacting, and that's what's called as glucose intolerance or pre-diabetes, which would then convert to diabetes. So why is this so much problematic? So why eating processed food? Is it just the sugar? What effect does it have? So we now know that the processed food actually acts like bugs. Yeah, it acts like almost like an infection. And how it does is that it impairs the gut barrier. Now, our intestinal barrier is only one cell thick. Yeah? So the intestines that start from after your stomach right to your rectum is actually a very thin barrier that separates us from the outside environment. And that one cell layer thickness also separates it from the blood vessel. So when we eat, the the intestinal cells have the role of absorbing nutrients and then sending them into the bloodstream. Now, what happens due to the inflammatory effects of processed food is the tight junctions between the cells get loose, and food that should actually not pass into the blood now starts to pass. The body recognizes these foods now as pathogens, as bacteria, virus, and starts to make antibodies against it. So, you would have heard that, food allergies are very common. I think rather than allergies, these are actually intolerances. And the reason why they have become more common, that more and more of us have actually an impaired gut lining, leading to this mechanism where our body is now reacting to things, which is basically undigested food that has slipped into the blood too quickly before digestion. And if this leads to the body making antibodies that then start to attack our own cells because it gets confused between the food. So for example, many people with avocado allergy can have latex allergy because the structure of the cell of the avocado and the antigen is similar. You would have heard that many people with thyroid are often have a gluten intolerance because the gluten or wheat, the gluten antigen in wheat looks very similar to the thyroid cells. So your body attacks or makes antibodies against the wheat, but ends up attacking the thyroid instead. So this is the mechanism that leads to the inflammation and leads to other diseases. I will quit this and just quickly come to the Mediterranean, and then I will stop. So again, I think how should we start to do this? So you will see on the right-hand side plate, this is the recommendation that I follow. I encourage my patients to, so I don't know if you can see me as well as the slide. I've got a Corel plate in front of me, which is exactly like the plate there. It probably cost about £5. And I ask many of my patients to start with this if they are confused about portion. The bigger portion, the half of the plate, is filled with vegetables, either raw or cooked. Yeah, and I ask them to buy what is in season. Frozen is absolutely fine, because for my patients, prepping the vegetables for every meal it can be an onerous task. I encourage them to use herbs. Yeah, herbs are the most nutrient dense vegetables, as you saw in that list. I ask them to grow. I ask them to forage, foraging from safe places, some literally free food. I also ask them to rotate their grocery list. So, if you're going grocery shopping, make sure that this week you don't buy anything that you bought last week. Yeah, forget about staples. It is the staples that trap us into eating the same food all the time. Try to buy different colors, and instead of using salt, to make it more Mediterranean, I encourage them to dress their vegetables, especially if they are eating their salad, with extra virgin olive oil and apple cider vinegar instead of salt, so that it also helps in the digestion of the food. So half the plate is made up of vegetables. The other half now consists of a palm-sized portion of protein. Now this can be vegetable protein, but the Mediterranean diet encourages the consumption of fish at least 2 to 3 times a week. And again, this should not be, like deeply fried, but, as gently cooked as possible. And the last quarter can be whole grains. Now, for my patients, I ask them if they are wanting to lose weight and have more energy, to actually reduce the amount of grains, but, depending on where the patient is at the moment. So the 12 components of the Mediterranean diet that I talked about are mostly plant-based food, a minimally processed food. I mean, for many of my patients who are really committed, I will say that the bread should be the only processed food that you buy as an alternative when you do not have a whole grain to replace it. Literally everything else should be as close to its natural form. Red meat is all right, but it should be infrequent and lean. Encourage eggs, moderate amount of dairy, olive oil as the principal source of fat, a moderate amount of red wine. The dessert should primarily be of a variety of fresh fruits of different color. And, these would be the components of the Mediterranean kind of eating. This is another infographic which I really like. This comes from Alliance for Natural Health. And I think this is more close to the kind of diet that is associated with all improvements of Mediterranean diet, whether it comes to cardiovascular, mental health, endocrine health, any type of health. This is what roughly the variation, and just see how colorful and beautiful it looks. And for mental health, the emphasis on fats has to be very clarified. Low fat just does not work for mental health, but the fat has to be healthy fats, extra virgin olive oil, nuts and seeds in different forms. If you eat fish, oily fish, and a quick code to remember, oily fish are, these are the small fishes because they have a short lifespan and they don't accumulate as much toxins as some of the bigger fishes like tuna does. So the acronym is SMASH: sardines, mackerel, anchovies, salmon, and herring. Not forgetting eggs as a very cheap and good source of protein and fats. And if you're eating meat, lean meat, not forgetting organ meat, which is very traditional food, which is often left out of modern meals. Another trick to get you started is stick a piece of paper on the fridge and do the 50 foods challenge. Yeah? Try and list 50 different kind of foods that you eat in a week, but you can only count every food once. So for example, if you had a tomato sauce based pasta, the tomato counts at 1, garlic counts as 1, the wheat counts as 1. And in the wheat, if you are eating those again, you don't count them. And see if you can reach at least 50 in a week, because the more variety of plant-based foods that you have in the diet, the more colors you have, the better your dietary nutrient diversity, but also microbial diversity. So I will stop there. And just a reminder that we think about food in both components. Yeah. So here is the neurotransmitter serotonin. As you can see, that it is not made it does not come from medication. It actually comes from a protein molecule in our body, tryptophan, which in turn is made from food. Similarly, the feel good, the satisfaction, the neurotransmitter of motivation, dopamine, does not come from a pill. It comes from protein, again, and it requires a lot of cofactors. But we also know that food is so much more complex than that. It is information. It's a healthcare intervention that we do several times a day. It is self-care. It can have all sorts of negative association, but it's one of the most powerful things that we can do. And I will stop there and stop the screen share. It is almost 9, and I think Panna said that we could probably go on 10 minutes.
Yeah. There is one question from Mayuri. What is the cause of pins? Oops. Hang on. I've lost it.
Pins and needles?
Yeah, pins and needles. I wanted to finish the question, but I don't know what happened. It just locked me
That's
out.
okay.
Okay.
That's okay.
What is the cause of pins and needles in the arms and legs? Can it be inflammation or nerves being pinched?
So I would suggest that, any symptom can be 100 different things based, again, on you as a person. But commonly, pins and needles, if we are thinking from a nutritional point of view, can be associated with a lack of vitamin B12, which is very common in vegetarian diets. So, it again depends on, what your overall health conditions are. If you do have a spinal condition, then you can have pins and needle in one arm. So again, you have to look at, the various things. So it's usually, I find, never one simple thing, but it's a series. Sometimes it can be traumatic, after an injury or a fall. But B12 in my practice is very common. It's a late sign of B12 deficiency and often missed. So if you are on the diabetic medication called metformin, or if you are on pantoprazole, omeprazole that stops the acid, this can affect the B12 absorption. If you consume a lot of alcohol, or if you have some health condition that affects the B12 absorption other than the diet, or if you are vegan, so vegetarians still get some from milk, that can lead to B12 deficiency, or it could be B6 deficiency as well. So it could be many things.
Okay. Manisha is asking, how can vegans get sufficient omega-3 and 6 from food or supplements? Is it flaxseed oil a good source?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. So when we think about omega-3, so the omega essential fatty acids have exist in a balance. So the ideal balance is 1 is to, let's say 6 or 7. In modern diets, the omega index is now found to be 1 is to 30. Yeah, so we are eating a lot more omega-6 because we consume a lot of food that has vegetable oils and not enough omega-3. So the balance has become lopsided. So I think the approach should be both. So if you're a vegan, you should lower the intake of the omega-6, you reduce the consumption of seed oil, increase the consumption of the precursor, or so if you're a vegan, all that happens is that the steps of the conversion to omega-3 is a bit longer than when you consume fish. So you kind of bypass that and you get more kind of ready-made. But flaxseed, borage, evening primrose oil, they are all kind of precursors. So on a day-to-day basis, having flaxseed, which is freshly ground. So if you have a little coffee grinder, my suggestion would be you take some chia seed, you take some flaxseed, grind it. The best way would be to use a powerful blender, but blend it with ice, because these are very heat labile. If they become hot, then they get oxidized. So, and you want that oxidation process to not happen outside, because you want that antioxidant effect to happen inside. The other thing is, chewing it really well is a key. In terms of supplements, you do get marine, algae-based omega-3 that vegans use. So if you feel your diet is quite insufficient, you can use that. But walnuts, olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, at least 1 or 2 tablespoons every single day, all that will improve the omega-3 index.
Okay. What is the importance of mindful eating?
Oh, I love that question. Love that question. It's extremely important. Yeah. I think eating mindlessly can undo even having the best diet in the world. Yeah. Because if you are not eating, if you are eating in a stress, the boss is chasing, you're on the phone call, you're worried, you're rushed, you will fill your body with the calories for energy. But again, this is why I love Ayurveda, because you need to have a system that is open and receptive. That's where the small rituals, Panna, I love that you had a prayer at the start, because all of this brings in an alignment. ये नहीं सोच रहा कोई कि अरे वाह मेरी राजमा चल रहा है या आज शाम को क्या. We are all we're using those rituals to bring us, we automatically come into alignment. So even if you're not religious, I personally advise my patients to actually, just take a few breaths. I myself will do anulom vilom because I'm a very excitable person. Switch off the computer, even just physically sitting back, taking a few deep breaths can improve the receptivity. If you can do 20 minutes of mindful eating, again, there is research to show that the nutrient absorption from the exactly same food eaten mindfully versus eaten as usual while talking to a friend in a cafe can have completely different absorption. So yes, very, very important, Niti, to be mindful. And I this is one area where I think I should follow my own advice, because many of my meals are on the go in between patients. Even though I'm trying to eat better.
Okay. Has anybody else got a
I think
question?
there
Yes,
is one,
please.
Mayuri has asked, what food group should we eat in order to boost energy? So again, Mayuri, I think I'm one of those Ghisa hua record that will always say it all depends. It all depends on, on your health status. Are you anemic? Do you have a thyroid condition? What's your weight like? But I would begin from, that sugar chart. I would do a 3-day food diary and see the pattern of your energy. Have you had COVID recently? When did that energy change? Did it change after having a child? So many factors have to be brought into account. But what I find in clinical practice most often, that energy often is because of lack of adequate hydration, too much sugar, and when I say sugar, I mean carbs. So the balance of carbs, there is not enough. You want that, sugar to burn like coal, not like a newspaper. Yeah. So any carb that your food is carrying should be wrapped around fiber and protein and fat and give you that slow energy. But sometimes it could be down to mitochondrial dysfunction, which means what is blocking each cell of your body to act as a battery, and that could be infection or a toxin, and that leads some deeper exploration. But I think to begin with, doing some of these holistic, I'm not somebody who believes that you need 1,000,000 tweaks and 1,000 supplements and 500. Yes, that is also a way to get for people who need that detail. I'm a great believer in this more holistic, that you have to take out the big roadblocks and then the whole system comes into balance. Yeah.
Do you need to eat nuts daily? Do you recommend to eat daily?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, again, talking about the omega-6 and 3, all of us are eating too much omega-6. So, and the nuts, again, like it is advised in Ayurveda, a handful is more than enough. Soaked is best. Sprouted is even better. And the way we do it in our house, for example, my parents are visiting from India and there is always on the windowsill, it's a routine. Yeah. In the evening before going to bed, you soak your 10 almonds. In the morning, you throw leave it. And within 4 and 5 hours you'll see a little bud coming. Yeah, you don't need. And that way, yeah, similarly you can do with the fenugreek. So things, and you will find so quickly, like I really miss it. Like in the morning, I'm searching for if it is not there. So yeah, absolutely. if you can't soak, I always, like in my work bag, there is always in our car, there is always a box of nuts, so that if the children get hungry, that is why I ask them, because they're compact source of energy. They'll keep you that fullness. If you're hydrated, nuts can really hold your appetite until the next meal, whereas if you eat a bag of crisp, you will feel fantastic for the next 5 minutes but hungry within 30 minutes. So using nuts like a snack. I do not think people should eat a lot, mainly because it reduces your appetite. And anything in excess in Ayurveda, nuts are supposed to have a lot of heat or energy. So there are certain nuts you would eat, certain nuts you would pair with milk. So for example, dates that are very hot are paired with milk to reduce its. So I don't know the science behind it, but definitely you should, and rotate your nuts as well, rather than eating the same nuts all the time.
Okay. Okay, I don't think there's any more questions unless somebody wants to raise their hand. I don't think so. I think we're done for today.
Excellent.
Parveen, have you got a question?
Lovely session, Panna and Pratima.
Thank you. Thank you.
It really embedded in the head. I only came join halfway. I've got a cold like you as well. I'm coughing and whatever. But it's really embedded. It's really nice.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Parveen, did you want to say something? No. Okay. Everybody is saying thank you very much for the session. It was worth taking in our brain. And you know what? For next month, Pratima will have something new to talk about, unless you have a special suggestion, and put it in our group, in our low carb group, and Pratima will pick it up, and then we'll talk about it next month. So we're looking forward to seeing you next month.
So, Panna, I'm not sure I will do the August session, which is why I asked for the dates.
Okay.
Mainly.
So if it's convenient, then Pratima will be there. If not, then the following month we'll.
I will definitely ask around to see if somebody is available for this hour to speak to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for all the participants. I hope you enjoyed our session today, and I will put out all the. I've taken the screenshots of the all the. What's the word?
Prezi.
That's the word. So you'll see them in our low carb, and catch up soon. Any more questions? Please put it on the group, and either Caroline or Pratima or Daksha will pick it up and reply to you guys. Thank you very much again for
Thank
a
you.
wonderful session, Pratima. It was really worthwhile listening to it, and I am a diabetic as well, so for me it was worth listening to it twice again and trying to digest it as well. So thank you again. Take care.
Thank you.
Have a
Bye-bye. Good
lovely week
night.
ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you all.